Coming up on Currently, we're talking with Beth Milligan and Craig Manning about short-term rentals, local sports, upcoming changes to Traverse City Light and Power, and additions to TVC Cherry Capital Airport. That's all ahead on Currently. Welcome to Currently, where we discuss some of the top local stories directly from the journalists who are covering them. I'm your host, Crystal Frost, and this podcast was recorded on Thursday, November 13th. The Lions are 6-3 after defeating the Commanders heading into Sunday, where they take on the Eagles. That said, things may change by the time you are watching or listening. Now, support for Currently comes from West Shore Bank. When you choose West Shore Bank, you are not just choosing a bank. You are choosing a partner committed to the well-being of our community. Visit them today on 8th Street or at westshorebank.com. Support also comes from Old Town Playhouse, where community comes together in downtown Traverse City. Find out all about the upcoming shows, including Roald Dahl's Matilda the Musical, with performances starting on December 5th on the Old Town Playhouse main stage. And from the Coin Slot Arcade Bar in Traverse City, it's a chill hangout with a variety of beer, live music, and pinball in downtown Traverse City. We are very excited to welcome back the amazing Craig Manning, a journalist for the Traverse City Ticker, the Leelanau Ticker, the TC Business News, the Northern Express. I mean, did I miss any?
Not locally, no thing,
Oh, do you have other
I freelance
projects
here and there sometimes.
Oh, and freelancer, check that out. Very cool. Nice to have you back, Craig.
Thank you. It's been a minute.
It's been a hot minute. Yes, it has. And Beth Milligan, it's nice to have you back.
Hello.
It's nice to be back. We were
I know
out
we
last
had a little
week.
break.
Yes.
It's that time of year. You had a little recovery time.
I know.
Which I think was good.
You know, I was sick. I had some big sickness of pneumonia in October, and then I didn't know that pneumonia could come back.
It's just,
it's
like a villain in a horror movie.
I know. I was like, what? I didn't know that could happen, but
This was
apparently
the
it never
sequel
really
for you.
left. Yeah. So I had to really chill. And I want to say, I'm going to say this on the record, that I was ready to go in, and Beth was like, what is wrong with you?
I'm like, girl.
You were like, listen, I don't want to see this whole thing that's going on here. So I want to say thank you for looking out for my best interest when I don't do so myself half the time. We have a really big show, and you guys have covered some pretty great, really exciting stories, to be honest with you. We're going to kick it over to you, Craig, to start. And the story that landed this week in the Ticker, the land of 9,000 Airbnbs and 9,000
I like that.
Yeah, and 9,000 Ticker comments.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Out, yeah.
lot of discourse there.
Yeah, a little bit.
Some controversy.
This
for
is
sure.
a controversial subject, though. So why don't you kind of take us through what the story was about, and how you gathered that information to note that, in this North Coast region, we have over 9,000 Airbnbs or short-term rentals.
Yeah, of course. Well, I feel like, people here are constantly talking about the tourism situation. We've definitely done stories about all the hotels that are under construction. I feel like people are always talking about saturation there. And we have a pretty good sense of how many hotel rooms there are at least in the Traverse City region.
Well, because, they have to file as a business. You can actually see them, and
you can
say,
see them, you can count the number of rooms.
Yes.
But, Airbnbs, obviously, not just Airbnbs. Airbnb has kind of become a catch-all, but obviously this means any short-term rental, Airbnb, VRBO, kind of any of those services. They can just be in your neighborhood, and you might know that it's a short-term rental, but it can also just kind of be invisible to you. It can look and feel like a regular residence. So our question really was, how many of these are in northern Michigan?
Right.
And, how much of an impact could that be having on the economy here, on the housing market, especially the housing market, given, how much attention is being paid to that. Anyway, so there's a company called AirDNA.
AirDNA. Okay,
and they are
it.
a global analytics business whose job is basically to track all this information I was just talking about. They're keeping track of where these are, how many there are, even down to things like, is this a 2-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house, or is it a studio apartment? So they have all this data that they keep track of. They scrape it from listings. They work directly with Airbnb hosts, and they have all these other data sources as well. So if they say a number, it's a pretty good number, and they also are very good at kind of keeping track of the fluctuations throughout the year, because there are pretty big swings in terms of how many short-term rentals are active at any given time. So I had reached out to this company and got connected with their director of economics and forecasting. His name is Bram Gallagher, and he prepared a very exhaustive report for me of not just the Traverse City region, but kind of the north coast of Michigan was how he referred to it. Okay. So basically stretching from Benzie and Leelanau counties on Lake Michigan, running through Grand Traverse County, but then also, up along the coast, tip
Antrim
of the Mitt, Charlevoix, all the way over to actually Lake Huron. So, this is a market. That region's not necessarily what we would always think of, but it does give a pretty good sense of, one, how many short-term rentals there are in this region, and also just kind of how popular that coastal Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, anything close to the Great Lakes in Michigan does pretty well. And these numbers blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really kind of jaw-dropping statistics here. Let's go through them.
Yeah. So I think the top line, and this is, referred to in that headline, is that in August of this year, there were 9,130 available short-term rental listings across that North Coast market.
Okay.
Obviously, I mentioned that these fluctuate quite a bit. This year, the low was in February when there were a little more than 6,100, and then that 9,130 was the peak.
Okay.
So definitely the summer season, you're going to see more of these than in the winter. There are obviously a lot of people who will, rent out their house for maybe a few months.
So maybe more of a long term, but it's a seasonal.
Yeah. So, people who own lake houses in the region who maybe want to be able to use those for a month out of the year, and then, the other 11 months, what am I doing with it?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm renting it out. Maybe the market demand isn't there, and I won't do that. But this is all kind of data that AirDNA keeps track of.
So I noticed that one of the stats that you captured was that you have seen the growth has slowed down a little bit.
Right.
In that you have this 9,100 or so short-term rentals right now over that that Gold Coast, if you will, the North Coast.
Sure.
But that has risen from 2021 by almost 40%. So you saw a really big influx in the last 4 years. You're seeing it slowing down even just this past year. What are some of the reasons you think that is happening?
Yeah. So that was one of the things that Bram Gallagher, when I was talking with him, he drew my attention to the fact that, there was all this growth kind of at the beginning part of this decade where you're seeing that peak number for the year really substantially increase from, around 6,500 to kind of that above 9,000. But if you actually drill down into the data a little further, you can see that, if you look back to August 2024, it was pretty much the same. It's around 9,000.
Yeah.
So then you have to ask kind of why the peak isn't increasing. Is it a demand situation?
Is it regulation?
That is what he believed, because, if you look kind of further in this article, there's plenty to state that, demand is not slowing down on these. So basically what he said is that, a lot of our units of government have started reckoning with this short-term rental situation and trying to figure out how do we regulate this?
Sure.
How do we, put caps on how many of these there can be or how many nights they can do this per year? And his feeling was that, that peak kind of plateauing was a sign that, we're seeing more of these regulations take hold, and that maybe is the limit, in summertime of what is allowed in these regions with all those different regulations.
It's so hard to think that these would be full, though, to me, because you also write about, sort of the short-term rentals versus the hotels. And we know that there are about 5,000 rooms, right?
Right. That's the the Traverse City region.
Right.
That's the Traverse City
just
tourism
in Traverse
number.
City. Okay.
So it's not just, City of Traverse City or even just Grand Traverse County. Traverse City Tourism does work a lot with Benzie County.
Yes.
They've got a few in Leelanau. But I think it kind of covers more of what we would normally consider probably the 5-county region, whereas this obviously is more expansive.
Sure.
But, I did pull out that number of the 5,000 rooms just because if you're thinking about this many short-term rentals and kind of the not even the room nights, but kind of the listing nights per month.
Sure.
It's actually, it's more than what we have in hotels in our ecosystem. So, if you're wondering why there's so much tourism or why it feels like there's more, well, that's maybe a place to look.
And we've written about in the Ticker, I think Craig and I both at different times, but there's been a lot of questions from people in the community about whether we have too many hotels, whether, there's still more coming on. There's at least, 2 right in downtown Traverse City, the new Marriott and the boutique hotel going in next to the Record Eagle, where the hole in the ground is. And so I think there's been a lot of questions about that saturation. I mean, it's interesting to think collectively of what the saturation looks like across hotels and short-term rentals. Clearly, we're still seeing demand. I think a lot of travel consumers, especially those who have, extra money to spend, really seem to like the privacy of short-term rentals.
Yeah,
the ability
absolutely.
to, maybe be on the water or places where hotels can't develop or haven't been able to develop, to have multiple families in the same compound. I'm kind of curious. I mean, this isn't something I know yet, but we'll have to keep an eye on. A trend is, with these more hotel rooms even coming online and consumers' taste may be trending in a different direction to short-term rentals. If there might be a balancing in the market because hotels are simply going to have to start lowering prices. We still see pretty high hotel rates in the summer.
Yeah.
Especially for the peak hotels like your Hotel Indigo, something downtown that's close to the water, to the festivals. But at a certain point, if there's just too much availability in the market, hotels start competing by lowering prices. And then you can get a market swing because people are like, well, now I can get a hotel pretty cheap downtown.
Right,
Maybe
right.
that's more affordable than an STR.
Well, and I'm also wondering, too, as you've talked about new hotels coming online, we also know that there have been hotels that have closed. So, I mean, obviously that is the supply and demand, but it's also just that's the economics of things. When there's a lot of other opportunities, then maybe people aren't going to choose that older hotel, possibly.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, too, if hotel design will change. If you're talking about more people wanting to, say, have multiple families, or you want to have maybe more suites that are opening up. So you have 1, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom suites in hotels. I wonder if that will start to change.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it could.
I think we've seen some of that, right? The was it a Hyatt that was going to go in?
Yeah, there's been a few like
That's
that
obviously been delayed, but I think the proposal there was kind of to target maybe a more long-term stay, or just someone who's looking for a suite and a kitchen and things like that you would get from an Airbnb, but not necessarily most of the hotels. So I think there's definitely something to that.
So obviously, I mentioned how many comments on the Traverse City Ticker Facebook page this received. I think it's you're hovering at this moment like at around 560 or so, which is a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a knee-jerk reaction that people have if you live here in the Grand Traverse region, where you see or hear about short-term rentals. And if you are one of the thousands of people who are struggling to find affordable housing, that is where you place your blame, right? It's like, it's because of this, which I know it's a much broader and nuanced and really complex problem when we have, talking about housing in Northwest Michigan. But I see a lot of those comments playing out here. Just it's their problem. Then you have the realtors and the brokers that are kind of weighing in and going, well, this is a great business opportunity for some people. Then you have people who are actually own Airbnbs, and that's how they can afford their mortgage, right? So it's not. This is the reason that we're having this issue, right? It's not the one reason.
Yeah, and lurking in the background discussion, I mean, it is very complicated and nuanced because some of the places that short-term rentals are located, particularly in the city of Traverse City because of its zoning regulations, are in commercial areas where it's some of the most expensive land downtown. And even if that was developed, it likely would not be affordable housing or even market rate housing. It'd likely be luxury condos if they weren't doing short-term rentals. So some of it is like, they're trying to, I think the city's been moving to try to congregate STRs in areas where it makes sense, like a tourism business corridor, and not in the residential neighborhoods where it's not allowed unless it's like kind of a bed and breakfast type of situation. The other thing that Craig has written about a lot, and I think is continuing to cover, is all of this discussion is prompting really intensive state discussions with legislation about having Airbnbs contribute in some way to the infrastructure impacts that they're having. So some kind of change in legislation that would allow the city to tax Airbnbs and get some of that money back that right now Traverse City Tourism can capture from hotels for tourism promotion dollars, but can't put towards other types of expenses in the town, like our roads, our infrastructure. Maybe a change in tax would help with that.
And not to get ahead of us, but there will be another story about that coming next week. Just to give a preview. But yes, there is a proposal on the table in the legislature, co-sponsored by Representative John Roth from our area, that would make it possible for municipalities to tack on an extra 3% tax to hotels, motels, and short-term rentals that would then be used to fund local things like infrastructure or emergency services. Because there's definitely a growing sense, I think, from, just chatter around town and probably these comments that, we're seeing so much tourism, it's continuing to grow, but I think a lot of people feel like they're not getting much out of it, and our region isn't getting much out of it. Obviously, that ignores a whole lot of nuance about the economic importance of tourism to our region. So this is it's a very delicate conversation, and I think this legislation will face something of an uphill battle. But the discussion is definitely starting to happen more. And I think things like the numbers in this article are probably part of the reason why.
Well, I would encourage you to go to Traverse Ticker and read the full article. I know it can be really tempting to see a headline and go, I know what this is all about, and then get your keyboard warrior fingers out and make a comment. But really Craig put a lot of work into this. Read the whole story. And maybe develop your opinion at that point, because you do a great job of looking at all the sides of this and really just diving into the data, not giving an opinion, just going, this is what the numbers look like.
Right. Yeah. And the stats, they tell a lot of different stories. One of the things that I was just looking at is that, only 40% of these short-term rentals are available for rental year-round.
Right.
So then you have to ask, how many of these are people who live in our region year-round, who are renting something out for a month in the summer so that they can pay their bills. Unfortunately, one of the weaknesses of the data is it doesn't tell us that story, because everyone who owns one of these has their own story, and we can't tell that by looking at the numbers. But you can get hints at it from looking at the numbers, and I think just there's obviously so much more data that didn't make the article.
There could be someone who, maybe uses a short-term rental just during the week of Cherry Festival, or the 3 months of the, the horse shows, or what that looks like, and then it's not year-round. So really good point there. We're going to move on to talking about local sports, and we don't get to talk about sports very often, other than, our obsession with baseball and football.
Correct.
But local sports, you had 3 stories about some local sports happenings, Craig. And I want to kick things off, football, by talking about Glen Lake football. What's going on there? How, they won the district title. I mean, this happened.
Yeah. And we can probably pull together a few of these at once, because we had a few district title winning teams coming out of Northern Michigan. And I just made a point this fall, I think, to pay a little closer attention. Obviously, we don't have a full-time sports reporter at the Ticker, and I think most publications no longer have full-time sports reporters. But obviously, these teams are still continuing to play, and there's so much dedication in the community and so much passion for these teams. And so, we have a few district title winners who will this weekend be heading off to regionals.
Regionals?
Regionals.
Nice.
And then, obviously, if they win those games, then they're not that many steps off from a state title, at least a chance to play for one. So that includes Glen Lake, that includes Traverse City Central, and that includes Kingsley High School. And all of them won their games last weekend. So,
nice.
So, I just kind of dove in and did a little bit of play-by-play because all those games ended up being pretty exciting for one reason or another.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, first of all, like I love talking about local sports. Obviously when I had kids that were in the school system, I think I paid a lot more attention to it. Yeah. But when I can see something here and go, oh, that's kind of cool. That's great. Was there any, do you know about any controversy that happened with the Kingsley? Do you know anything about that?
The
goalpost?
Yes.
Can we talk about that? Because I was seeing some chatter.
Yeah, I didn't really get into that in the article. I wanted,
Yeah, you want to specify you didn't talk about that.
They did, yeah. I mean, I know a little bit about it, and maybe Craig does as well, but I know that there was a parent complaint about the football field goalposts in Kingsley. Mm-hmm. That forced them to adjust those just hours before the district final.
Wow.
So that was, they had to take them down. They weren't far enough apart. The uprights weren't. And so it created a whole little controversy. And, I think if you see behind the scenes and like overheard in Traverse City or where people tend to comment online about these things, I think that caused some bad feelings between families of the two schools. Some accusations of whether that was kind of messing with Kingsley right before the game. Right. They did, go on to
they were
clearly,
they
route
triumphed
that game
by a lot.
yeah.
So,
but yes, there was a little drama behind the scenes on that one.
That's such an interesting thing. I mean, do they have an official that comes out and like measures the goalposts before every game?
I mean, clearly this was something that was complaint driven. So no, I don't think they're out there measuring them before every game. But there are, the Michigan High School Athletic Association does have standards for these things. So they did determine that they were not regulation size.
All right. Well, that's good to know. I mean, although I think they should, maybe they hire me. I'll get out there measuring tape. We're good.
Good
we're
side
good,
hustle.
Jerry. Let's go.
Well, it's so interesting, like the controversy that can spring up around high school sports. It brings to mind Friday Night Lights or things of that, where there's such a passionate following. Obviously, that's also true of the rival schools in Traverse City.
Yes.
And there was such a cool, interesting narrative there this year because West and Central don't usually get to play each other twice in one season. No. Usually that's the big game, that's the one everyone looks forward to, and then win or lose, that's your result for the year. This year they played one another on consecutive Friday nights, including on Halloween. And the first one, West won, and the second one, Central won.
Yep.
But the second one, there was a playoff berth on the line, so Central got to carry on. And I think at that point, I heard some trash talking from the other side of town. I mean,
that is to be expected, though.
Well, sure,
right?
yeah.
Crosstown rivals. That's just how it is.
And Central was going to be going on to face a
pretty big,
pretty big. Highly ranked team in Muskegon, and I think some of the naysayers were there to say there's no chance, but the Trojans, that's my alma mater, so gotta give it up for them. But they held it together and won 16-14 in a pretty big upset, and now they're still in it. So
right.
Just some exciting results.
I like it. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk all about the changes to Traverse City Light and Power and an airport expansion for Cherry Capital Airport. But first, a word for West Shore Bank. Now, it is that time of year again. West Shore Bank's Spirit of Giving. That campaign is back, and it's your chance to make a real difference across 6 Michigan counties. Now, this year, your donation supports 6 incredible nonprofits that are serving Mason, Oceana, Manistee, Benzie, Muskegon, and Grand Traverse counties. From helping kiddos and seniors to fighting cancer and supporting families in need, every dollar goes directly to organizations making our community stronger. And here's the best part. West Shore Bank adds $1,000 per county. That's $6,000 total. That's some good math on my end. And if you're a first-time Giving Center donor, West Shore Bank will match your gift up to $25. So donating is easy. You can log into your WSB Touch app, select your amount, and give and your gift is automatically split among all 6 nonprofits. So let's spread some holiday cheer and make a lasting impact. Visit westshorebank.com to learn more and give today. Terms and conditions apply. All right, welcome back. Now, Beth, we're going to kind of switch gears here and talking about utilities.
Yes.
No more sports.
We go from sports to utilities. I feel like we're playing maybe Trivial Pursuit or something right now with the news.
Yeah, 2 different categories.
Yes.
Sure.
Tell us about Traverse City Light and Power is going to move the way that they are charging people. And this is really complicated. I read this story twice and I was like, I don't understand. Beth, please help me understand.
Yes, I'm going to try to explain it as simply as I can for folks. This is something to pay attention to if you're a Light and Power customer, because it is going to affect every Light and Power customer, whether you're residential or commercial, starting in December. So all of the customers are going to be transitioned to a new rate structure, which is called time of use.
TOU.
So time of use is dynamic pricing. The best way I describe it to people is it's very similar to what surge pricing looks like for Uber.
Oh.
So if you've ever taken a ride share and you're trying to catch a ride at a peak time of night and all of a sudden the prices go up, it's fluctuating based on demand in the market.
So when people are using more of the electricity, it's going to be higher.
Correct.
Okay.
So this is something that is not new to Light and Power. A lot of utilities are making this shift. Traditionally, this is true of Light and Power and with other utilities, to get their rate for a customer, they typically are averaging costs over the year to produce a kind of single flat rate that you're charged each month. So they're smoothing out those peaks and the valleys to kind of give you a consistent rate throughout the year.
Okay.
But that consistent rate is not actually reflecting the ups and downs of what your electricity is.
Sure.
It's just the utility trying to make it more reliable for you by giving you a flat rate. This is shifting to reflect those actual ups and downs. So what you're going to see on your bill are kind of 2 categories. They call them on peak and off peak.
Okay.
On peak and they're going to shift a little bit from summer to winter because the usage changes in the summer and winter. We have different light hours, things like that. But generally, from like mid-morning to late afternoon is the peak time during a weekday. And the reason for that, if you think about what's happening between, let's say,
I'm getting ready for work.
10 a.m. and 5 p.m. is that most of the businesses in the city are on. You've got all your lights on at Meijer. People are grocery shopping. All of the offices are open, running their AC, all of that. So, and commercial traffic is a huge part of the electric load on the grid. So during those weekday hours in the middle of the day, that's the peak time. Those are the highest rates. The off-peak time tends to be very early morning, the late evening, your weekends, and your holidays.
Not at my house.
I know. What's interesting, I did ask Light and Power about this. For us as, homeowners, we often think, oh, actually, my peak time is like I'm home at night. I'm home on the weekend. I'm home on holidays.
Right.
But the businesses tend to be closed during that time.
Sure.
And that's, again, what's driving a lot of the usage on the grid.
Okay.
So when you're in your on-peak times, your mid-afternoons, especially in the summer, what this system is trying to get you to do is to stop doing really energy-intensive things during the afternoons, like running your dishwasher, running your laundry machine, cranking the heat or the AC, charging your electric vehicles. They're trying to get you to save those activities for either the evenings or the weekends.
Or like in the middle of the night, hey, I got to wake up to do some laundry.
And the reason for this is because when we're at the peak grid in the afternoon, especially in the summer, when the demand is super high, the last generators that are coming online to produce power are using fossil fuels. The utilities are trying to move towards renewable energy.
Sure.
Light and Power has a lot of its portfolio coming from renewable energy, but it still has fossil fuels. And so if we can stop from triggering those last generators from coming online by reducing the grid demand, then we have cleaner energy. It's cheaper energy. And it's really kind of using financial incentives to change behavior among consumers.
Which that's a good incentive to change behavior.
I think it will be because what will happen, so here's what's going to happen in December. You're automatically going to be enrolled in a program called Echo Steady. The goal is to phase customers in over the next couple of years so that you don't see, whoa, all of a sudden my bill changed dramatically. It's trying to change it a little bit each year to get you to those rates so you can kind of get used to it, get used to trying to do your laundry at a different time. What we're going to see in about 4 years when the rates really kick in full time for everyone, and people can also choose to do this right away if they know they're going to change their energy usage. But the difference between on peak and off peak is almost double. So you're really going to start at a certain point getting penalized for using that expensive power and not have to try to move your behavior away from those other times.
All right. So tell me, is this going to change customer bills?
Yeah. So, when I spoke to Light and Power about this, they said the goal of this transition is to be revenue neutral. And they meant that for both themselves as a utility and for the customers. This is not meant to be a change that's going to make everybody's bills skyrocket. It's not meant to give the utility more revenue. It's supposed to be revenue neutral because right now the off-peak prices are lower than the current prices. Well, the on-peak will be higher. So again, we're kind of balancing those things, those extremes. So you may see higher bills during the summertime and likely see lower bills in the wintertime. The utility also said you could actually lower your bills from what you have today if you really try to change your behavior, if you really avoid using energy during those peak times. And they do have advisors at the Light and Power who will do energy coaching, they call it. They'll look at your energy usage in your home and they'll tell you, here are some things you could do to be saving money to actually bring your prices down. Those are going to look like things like getting a smart thermostat for your home so you can set the hours when it's peak or not, getting smart plugs, LED lights, things like that.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I think hopefully it's all going to just kind of come out okay, right, for people?
It's meant to. I mean, it really, if in a couple years as you transition, if you really are just not paying attention at all to when you use power and you're running everything in the middle of the afternoon in the summer, you're probably going to see your bill go up.
Yeah.
Light and Power has said that this isn't price gouging. For them, it's actually when the power is more expensive to produce.
Yeah.
So in their eyes, it's a more fair system because when customers are costing more to give power to, they're going to be charged more. When they're costing less, they're going to be charged less.
Makes sense to me. But you know what? I'm just going to say this, and this is my problem, and I'm going to change my behavior because I tend to get into a cleaning mode. And when I'm in cleaning mode, I've got music playing, I've got vacuums running, I'm doing laundry, I'm doing the dishes, I'm doing it all at once. So maybe you're just telling me to take it easy.
You're going to have to do that
incremental.
At midnight.
Yeah. Do it at midnight.
Your neighbors will love it.
Maybe turn the dishwasher on right before you go to bed or something like that.
Yeah, and your power will still be there. You can access it. They're not cutting off your power.
I promise you it will be there.
You have to live in darkness.
You just might see those fluctuations. I will just say, if you go to Light and Power's website, if you're a customer, they do have a lot of information there. It'll show what the specific times of day are. You can call someone and ask questions. So they do have resources available. It is a complex idea to understand at first. So feel free to call them and get help.
Yeah, you don't have to be all hello darkness, my old friend. That is
right.
Yeah, that's not there. You had a story this week as well, Beth, that we want to touch on as well. The county commissioner spent most of the meeting talking all about the Traverse City Airport, the Cherry Capital Airport, the airport additions, TVC. Tell us about that and really, did anything come of that meeting?
Sure. So I'll do a quick wrap up here at the end. It just did go for quite a bit of time on Wednesday. The commission had to move several agenda items that they had to next week because they really spent about 2.5 hours talking with the airport about this. There will be a vote coming next Wednesday. So this coming the 19th. This was a study session ahead of that vote. Grand Traverse County is being asked to pledge its full faith and credit to up to $71 million in bonds for this airport expansion, which is a $120 million project.
And they had to do that mainly because the airport doesn't have any sort of credit right now because they've been debt free.
Yeah, it's not that they don't have a bond rating.
Okay.
So when you go to the market to bond a project, your bond rating is really helpful in determining how many investors you can get to kind of bid on the project. Mm-hmm. The more competition you have, you typically get more favorable interest rates, so you get better bond terms. In this case, yes, the airport has been debt free for a long time, which you normally would think is a good thing. But typically, municipalities or airport authorities have some debt, which gives them this bond rating. Mm-hmm. They're asking the county to essentially use its bond rating to support the bonds for the project,
like a cosigner.
Yeah, essentially. This expansion that was just supposed to break ground in March is a huge project. It's going to expand up to 9 gates at TVC. There are 5 right now. They're losing one as part of the construction, so eventually they're going to have 9 total. New checkpoint, new concessions, all of these things. Very big project that's going to take 2 years to complete. They're hoping to be done by Memorial Day 2028. Half of that project is federally funded, The other half, the other 60 million, is through the bonds. And then when you add in interest and financing costs, that's where you get to 71 million. So there was a whole presentation this week that went through all of the airport's revenues. I think for commissioners, what they're trying to understand is what is going to be the county's exposure or liability for backing this bond project. They want to make sure Cherokee Airport can make its payments.
Yeah, because if they don't,
the county does have to step in and make those payments. So it's a real obligation. I will say that the financial advisors for both the airport and the county were there. The county's financial advisors said that they have done a lot to add in more protections for the county in this deal. So there are things like an account that extra money is going to go in. So if there's a year, let's say a COVID year, where there's a downturn and the airport doesn't have the money it thought it was going to, there's this account sitting there that has one annual payment in it as a backup system. If Grand Traverse County ever has to step in and make that bond payment, the terms now stay, it's among the first things to get reimbursed when the airport starts getting enough revenue in. So there are these protections. The last thing I think I would mention, this has brought up a really big issue about the airport. We've hinted about it on the show before. It's an ongoing discussion. We're growing a very large airport within city limits.
Yes.
Other airports in other parts of the state, typically, if you think of GR, other places, they're more on the outskirts of town. They have this whole ecosystems of hotels around them and stuff. And so we did see people in public comment, both on the Ticker page and at the meeting this week, who live in neighborhoods by that airport, raising the issue of whether this is the best place long-term for TVC to be. Worried about, everything from noise pollution to tree clearing at sites like Oakwood Cemetery, which is in the flight path. What if a plane crashes in town? It's going to be right in the middle of the city if we have a plane crash at the airport.
Yeah.
The thing I would say is the airport has talked about this. Kevin Klein, the CEO, talked to commissioners and just said, if you think about the size of TVC, to move it somewhere else, 3,000 to 5,000 acres of land that you'd probably have to find, which is probably going to be clearing things like forest, wetland, whatever.
Yeah.
$5 to $6 billion estimate to move it. And then probably would have to be taxpayer funded or locally funded because the federal government is likely not to just be like, here's $6 billion after they've already invested in an existing site in Traverse City.
Well,
Go build a new airport.
I
feel, the ship has sailed.
The ship might have been sailed. I understand the concerns from residents.
For sure.
And there's a real there's been points in the airport's history where perhaps that move might have been more pragmatic. I think now, whether you agree with where the airport is located or not, it does seem extremely difficult and cost prohibitive to move it. So the next step is then, if it's going to continue to grow there, I think ongoing discussions about how to mitigate those impacts. They talked about engine technology is getting quieter. They talked to, NMC's flight school about doing their pattern work higher so the neighborhoods don't hear it. Sometimes you see at the Civic Center, you just see a plane going in a circle for an hour and it drives you nuts. They're trying to move those up. So there are discussions, but this growth seems, to be coming whether you like it to or not.
Yeah. One thing that Kevin also talked about and that you mentioned in your story was that, I think there's this idea that these are all tourists that are coming to the area. And yes, it's true that, having a good airport does definitely enhance and support tourism. But the majority, I would say over half is what you wrote about of the folks that are using the airport are local.
Yeah. And this was what they were trying to make the point for the bonding is that, if Grand Traverse County for some reason didn't lend its bond rating and support to this project, TVC would still go and bond it. It's probably going to have a much higher cost of the project. They estimated over $16 million more. And the point from the airport officials was that that $16 million will be passed on to the airlines, who will pass it on to the customers. And over half of the customers are within a 50-mile radius of the airport. So essentially, they're trying to make the argument those price hikes will hit people in our community, in your backyard. Yeah. This is a chance to keep the cost down for not just the airport, but for its customers.
And wanting to maintain that competitiveness. I mean, the reason that people are no longer driving to other airports, to leave on a flight is because TVC has been able to be competitive.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'll just mention is that growth, it's interesting. They're not building for future growth. The growth that they're building for with this expansion is the growth that they have right now. That's what they're required to do by the FAA. They can't just say, oh, in 5 years we're going to need this, so we're going to build it. They're building for the flights they already have, which is up to 72 a day in the summer. And many times those airlines are just sitting out on the tarmac waiting to come into a gate because there's not gates available, or they're actually going out, putting people on a bus and bringing them back
I've been on one of those
to the terminal.
I prefer that to staying on the plane longer, personally.
Yes.
So it's again, it's the demand is there now. The airport needs to expand. It's the growth that they have there right now is they need a bigger airport to accommodate.
Well, yeah, great work covering that story. And again, I encourage you to go to traversticker.com and read all about Light and Power changes, read all about the incredible local sports, read all about short-term rentals, and of course, read all about the expansion and of the Traverse City Airport. So
read before you comment is
before you comment is nice.
Rule.
Yeah, it would be a nice
we
rule.
like that.
I like it. Before we go, I always like to ask you what are you looking forward to this week? And I think we'll start with you, Craig.
Sure. Yeah. So I don't know if you know this, Christal, but before I was a journalist, I was a music guy.
Yes, I did know that.
I went to college for vocal performance and found my way into journalism through music journalism.
Right.
Music blogging, and that's kind of how I got started. But for the past 34 weeks, I've been working on this essay series called My Life in 35 Songs.
I've seen little clips of this. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the last one is coming up next week. So number 35 of 35, and that will publish on Tuesday on my 35th birthday.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
I'm just, I'm extremely proud of this series. It's kind of blending music criticism with memoir and really trying to capture, I guess, what music means to someone who, really obsesses over it and makes it, a huge part of their life. So, seeing the finish line there is pretty cool. It's ultimately will be a book length project once it's done. Well, it is done. It's been done for a while.
How can people how can they find this?
Sure. So the website I write for regularly as a music journalist, it's called chorus.fm. And if you go to the homepage, it's pretty easy to find because, it's a...
I see
there it is. Yeah. It's been running so long and there are so many of them. And so the last one will be up next Tuesday morning.
That's so cool. Well, that's great. And happy birthday.
Thank you.
I love that you're looking forward to the work you did for your birthday.
Well, also looking forward to the celebrations of 35.
That's great.
Yeah. Just a cool finished project for 2025.
Well, that's fantastic. I am looking forward to a couple of things that I'm not going to steal thunder on because I know you and I are doing some stuff together this weekend. But I am, for the first time, I have a lot of sisters. So I actually have 4 sisters, Jamie, Kayla, I have to count them, Jamie, Kayla, Erica, Amanda. And the 5 of us are going to be staying at a local hotel. And we have a big, a couple of suites, and we're going to do a sister sleepover for the first time, I think really ever, because my youngest sister is 16 years younger than me.
Wow.
So realistically, I don't know when the last time we all slept in the same place, right? So it's going to be a lot of fun. Maybe never. I mean, she probably when she was a baby, but I was just like, baby, get out of here.
She didn't know. She won't remember that, though.
No, she wouldn't remember. So so now we're all like very grown ups. She's in her 30s and I'm in my 40s. Do the math. And we're all going to be doing this sister sleepover. So it's exciting. I know. It'll be fun.
You chose hotel.
I chose a
short-term rental.
Which is an interesting thing because we wanted to use the hot tub.
Nice.
Sure.
That's a big deal. Yeah.
I have a weekend of musical events. I'm so excited. So you and I are going tomorrow night I guess tonight when the episode comes out, to see 9 to 5 at Interlaken.
Yeah, and
the
that
kids
is
are incredible.
Dolly Parton.
Yes. We're also, I think, both going to the TC Phil on Sunday to see our friend Gary Gatsky, friend of the show, Gary Gatsky, who will be on the show next week for another food fight segment. He's playing with TC Phil for this Bach concert this weekend. There's one on Saturday, one on Sunday. I think there's a few tickets left if folks want to go. And then my brother-in-law, Dan, is part of a band called Trash Can Symphony that is playing a rock show at Eugene's Record Co-op on Saturday night. I know.
I didn't know that.
He's been a musician his whole life, but now he's gotten back into a band, and that's going to be fun.
That's so cool. Yeah. Well, shout out to that.
Name.
What's the name of the band?
Trash Can Symphony.
Trash Can Symphony.
He's a drummer, so he'll be drumming
fantastic.
it up. Yeah.
I love it. Well,
Is his drum set built of trash cans?
It should be.
Oh my gosh. Okay, how can we make that happen? I love it. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun, and I just want to say thanks again to Beth Milligan and Craig Manning for another great show. And as Beth said, join us next week as Gary Gatsky returns for Food Fight. This time we're doing the hard work of taste testing, I should say, some of the best pies in northern Michigan ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday. We will taste them for you, and then you can buy the ones that we like, right? Be sure to subscribe to the show on all platforms at crystalfrost.com. Follow us on social media. Subscribe to Currently with Crystal Frost wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also watch the full show on YouTube and Facebook. Currently is a Compass local podcast produced by Pancake Boy Productions in Traverse City. Big thanks to our sponsors, Old Town Playhouse and the Coin Slot, and our lead supporter, West Shore Bank. We'll see you next week.